everybody. I hope everyone's doing okay. We're going to go over two different types of photography. Last time we looked at wildlife photography and fashion photography. So this time we're going to be looking at two different ones. So before we get started, let's see if you can remember what are the different types of photography. Remember I said we were going to talk about 8 over the four videos, so 2 each video. Can you remember? Let's go on the next slide. So we've got portrait, wedding, sport, journalism, documentary, fashion, wildlife, and fine art. So we're going to start off by looking at sport photography. Okay, so sport photography focuses on showing sport in action. Okay, it's not really photographs of sports people posing or portraits. What we are most interested in seeing is the action taking place. So the person in the middle of sprinting or the team in the middle of scoring a goal. Okay, so and as such, the photographer tries to capture the important moments in the game. We're not so bothered about the defender running across the field if the ball is in the possession of the other team. Okay, it's not that important. We want to see the action. And these are the best photos, and these are the photos that are going to be taken or bought up by newspapers and magazines. So, as we know, the photographer hasn't got any control over the poses or the background. Everything will be spontaneous. The photographer has to wait, has to read the game, has to see what's going on, and decide what is the best shutter speed for this situation, what is the best aperture, what is the best ISO to get the best photo. As you can see in the middle is this gentleman running. He's in a running race, so he's running so fast that the photographers use the correct shutter speed to be able to catch him in one position. He's not blurry, but you can see other parts of his body are. Okay? So that's a photographer's choice. He's decided. What's really important is that the photographer must have knowledge of the sportsman or the team. And this is mainly because if they are watching a golfer and the golfer gets a hole-in-one, they should know what the celebration of that golfer is so that they are ready to capture that moment and not miss it. Same with football teams. If there's an attacker, what will they do if they get the goal in the ball in the goal? So they are ready, waiting for that moment to capture. And finally, photographers have good links to different newspapers and magazines. Okay, and they are their customers basically. The newspapers will buy the images because they want to put them. If they're iconic images, they'll put them in their magazines or newspapers to show what's happened, perhaps over the weekend in different fixtures, football fixtures, in the Olympic Games, for example. So, where did sports photography come from? So, athletes have always been of interest, okay? Previously, athletes would have been carved statues, and they would have shown the most popular athletes. But as sport increased in popularity amongst higher and lower classes, groups and individual poses were taken. So the person would have been standing, sitting, not in action. However, in the 1930s, this is when shutter speed increased. So as I discussed, shutter speed is very important in sports photography because the photographer is generally trying to capture a moment of time when the subject is moving, okay? Such as scoring a goal, hitting the tennis ball, running. So the shutter speed really helps with that. And then in 1954, that is when the first sports magazine was published. And from then, that's when sports photography took off. So one of a very influential sports photographer, was Liefer. He was born in 1942 and he is still shooting now. He's American. And we can see here we've got some of his images, and there are some iconic images. So in the left-hand corner, you'll see Muhammad Ali. That is a very well-known photo. In the bottom left, we've got Tiger Woods playing golf. And what I'd like to bring to your attention is, first of all, if we look at that photo of Muhammad Ali, we'll see that this image really shows a narrative of what has happened in that game. Muhammad Ali is standing above his opponent, towering down. He looks quite aggressive. He looks like he's in the position of power, and his opponent is lying down as if he's surrendering. He looks weak and powerless. Okay? And that image shows a narrative. In that one picture, you can see exactly what is happening. You can understand it. You don't need to read anything. You can see what's happened. You can see he also uses framing, which we've discussed. In this top right-hand corner, you can see that the goal, the crossbar, he's used the goal as a frame to the image. It makes us feel like we are sitting at the back of the goal and we are watching exactly what's going on. We feel like we're part of the game. He's also used his rule of thirds. So on the right-hand side, we can see here with the jockey and the horse is exactly in the right-hand third. And it makes us feel, as the viewer, like the horse is galloping towards us and into the space. And really, you can just imagine how fast that horse is running, but he has used the correct shutter speed, and you are able to see so much detail. I can hear the horse galloping because it's flicking back the mud on the ground. And with all of these, you would have to use, like in wildlife photography, you would have to use a telephoto lens. So because you're not going to be close to the action. Okay? In this ice hockey photo, you're at the side of the rink, but you're not on the rink following the puck around. Okay? Same with Tiger Woods over here playing golf. You need to use your telephoto lens, which, as we know, is heavy, and any movement by the photographer means that the image could be blurry. So it still gives us a lovely amount of detail, but obviously it's hard to work with. And again, with this image of Tiger Woods, I love the position of Tiger because you can follow his eye, his gaze. And because there's so much space, you think, wow, he must have really hit that golf ball far. Okay, so some lovely photos there by Neil Liefer. Right, and then we're going to move on to, photojournalism or journalism photography. Okay, this is quite a tough one to get your head around because really, photojournalism, documentary, sports photography, they're all very similar. But photojournalism is there's some quite specific needs and demands. So the difference between photojournalism and documentary is that journalism is one specific event that's being photographed, whereas documentary tends to be a photographer following a group of people or an event that's taken place over a long period of time. So maybe over a year or 2 years, and documenting what is happening to that group of people. So the images must show a whole event in one photo. You want to be able to look at that photo and understand exactly what's going on. Understand who is involved, what is happening, where is it. And you want to be able to read the emotions. It's very important. So photographers must have a good understanding of the situation where they are shooting. So if you're in the middle of a war, for example, you need to know who is fighting who, Why is it taking place? How are the people here feeling? Because they are the sort of things that you want to capture. And the newspapers and magazines who are going to buy your photos all want those sorts of photos because they are iconic and they'll be put onto newspapers. And they're going to sell those newspapers. Photojournalism also must not show bias, okay? It shouldn't be one-sided, okay? It needs to show the whole story, the two sides of the story of everyone, of the people who are involved. And it has to show an exact representation of events, okay? You don't, just because, so some photojournalists might follow a platoon or an army squadron, okay? Just because you're following those people doesn't mean that you support them, okay? You're just there to show exactly what's happening. And some photojournalists might have to work in dangerous conditions. Since 2002, there have been over 1,000 photojournalists who have been killed because they've gone to war, places of war. And although they are not targeted, because as I said, the photojournalists aren't on one side or the other. They are there just to show the story. They shouldn't be targeted, doesn't mean that that's not the case. That has been the case, that some photojournalists have been murdered. But it also means there are some photojournalists who we're going to talk about next who have been caught up in the crossfire, okay? And because of that, obviously these photojournalists may be exposed to tragedies. So there is a very infamous photo of the famine in Ethiopia. And there's a very famous photo of a child who is on a road, and the child looks starved, like hasn't had any food, and it appears that the child is about to die. And up the road, just for a few feet away, there's a vulture, and a vulture is a flesh-eating bird, and the vulture is waiting for the child to die so that it can eat the child. And the photographer who took that photo could not interfere, although it's against human nature. And that photojournalist often talks about how they've really struggled with their mental health since then. So I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. But basically, how did photojournalism start? So the first true photojournalism is often attributed to two photographers called Carol Zathmari and Roger Fenton. And they documented the Crimean War in 1853-1856. So they are the first known photojournalists who've gone to a specific event to photograph it. And we also are aware that a lot of photojournalists went to World War II and they documented the atrocities of what was happening there. However, following World War II, there was a code of conduct put into place. So photojournalists were obliged to follow the following rules. So they were not allowed to pose or posture, okay? There should be no artificial lighting and there should be no manipulation of the scene. Similarly, there shouldn't be any manipulation of the photo when developing the photos, okay? So most photos that you'll see, wildlife photography, sports photography, fashion photography, when the photos are being developed, the photographer will adjust them to make the colours look brighter or to take away some of the wrinkles, okay? Take away some of the imperfections. However, photojournalism, you cannot do that. You have to show exactly what is going on in the photo. So when a photojournalist wants to join the Association of Photojournalists, they must take an oath. And a big part of this oath is that they will not interfere with what is going on if they're in a war, okay? So as I said, the photojournalist took the photo of that child who was being stalked by the vulture. And although he wanted to interfere, to save the child, to pick the child up, to get the child food, it is against the oath. They need to let nature or let what's going on happen. And so for that reason, a lot of photographers, war photographers, because they're not interfering, they're there just to take photos and tell a story. They're not targeted by either side of the war. They're there as bystanders. So here we go. So Tim Hetherington was a British photojournalist. He was born in 1970 and unfortunately he died in 2011. He died because he was caught up in Libya and a bomb went off and he had some shrapnel. Shrapnel came away from the bomb and struck him. He didn't die straight away, but he died because of loss of blood. Okay? So he was there doing his job, trying to tell a story. So we've got 5 photos here. They all tell very different stories. We can see that we've got a couple of photos to do with football, where he has used framing here. It makes us feel like we're part of the crowd, we're part of the football match. And here we've got 3 people, all without one foot. And you can see there's a football there and there's their shadows. So what Tim Hetherington did was he was exploring the healing qualities of sport in war-torn Western Africa. Although there were huge wars going on in Western Africa, everyone came together when it came to football. And it's very similar nowadays. People come together when it comes to football. And then on the left-hand side here, we've got this is a local guide, okay? And there's in the background, he's used leading lines here. It makes your eyes wander to the back of the photo to see how many people there are. That's a UN Indian battalion on patrol in an area controlled by a rebel group, the Revolutionary United Front, and that's in Sierra Leone, another place where there was a big civil war, and he was documenting what was going on. It's an interesting photo because you instantaneously see the man at the front and you look into his eyes and you wonder, what is he thinking? He looks worried, is my opinion. You might think differently. And then you can see on the right-hand side, we've got a group of men. And these are American army soldiers. And Tim Hetherington wanted to explore what men are like when they are confronted with death every day. And he wanted to show men being themselves, being at one with each other, being the only people they have for each other at that time, and how close you become. So really, I want to focus on this photo at the top. So this photo, okay, Tim Hetherington had spent 15 months in fact, in Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, there was a lot of Taliban activities and lots of patrols. We can see on the left-hand side here, we've got an American soldier. We know it's an American soldier. Nothing tells us, there's no writing. He doesn't say, hey, I'm an American soldier. But you can tell by his uniform and by knowing the history of what was going on in Afghanistan at that time. And then we can see there's a child in the middle. And he's staring at the soldier. You can see in his eyes, he doesn't look angry. He looks a little bit wary. He looks worried. He looks distrusting, okay? However, we see this gentleman on the side who looks like a local from Afghanistan. And he doesn't have the same look. He looks more calm. It looks like he's comforting his son, the young boy. And it's very interesting, the difference between the two looks, okay? The gentleman looks more trusting, and that could show the trust that the local people in Afghanistan have of the American occupation, the American soldiers who are there, okay? When you actually look at the photo, it's not actually a very technically good photo, okay? It hasn't followed many of the composition rules that we've talked about. You can see it's not in focus. There are areas where it's a little bit blurry. But There's so much detail in this photo that it tells a story, and it makes it a strong photo. It's very captivating, and yeah, that really shows off what photojournalists do. So, what is your task? I want you to have a look at these two photos. Photo of baseball player on the left, and well, I'm not going to describe the one on the right hand side. What I want you to do is look at these two photos, and I would like you to write or record yourself speaking a description of what you see, and tell me a story about what you see. What can you see on the left hand side? What story does that tell? What sort of emotions does it bring up? Do you like the photo? Has it followed any of the rules of composition? And finally, on the right hand side, do the same thing for this photo. Does it follow the rules of composition? What does it make you feel? What can you see? Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And please send me any of your photos. Take care, everyone. Bye.